Enjoy this Wild Soul Gathering production. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie. Pour yourself a really tall glass of spiritual curiosity and join me for the Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious podcast. In the spirit of happy hour, cheers to some new insights, peace, revitalization, and perhaps an aha moment that may change your life. Hi, welcome everyone. Today in the studio we have financial healer and money therapist Julie Murphy joining us. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Really excited. I'm excited to talk about money and your approach to creating abundance and healing past money issues.
Yes.
I think the second part of that gets missed a lot when money discussions come up. I know you've authored the best-selling book, Awaken Your Wealth, and we're going to delve into that a little later into the show. But first, let's start a little bit with your story. I believe, Julie, that you were brought up in a household that was immersed in scarcity. Can you share a little bit about what that looked like and how you transformed into a life of abundance from that?
Yeah, I have 11 brothers and sisters.
Oh, God bless you.
We were in a 3-bedroom house, so there were 14 people in 3 bedrooms, a split level.
Okay.
So there was never enough to go around, right? Didn't realize it until I was in my adult years when my aunt said to me, Joel, just watch your family at Christmas when we're at grandma's house. And I was out of college at the time, and I watched my brothers and sisters like rush to the table when all the food was ready. It's like, because it was this whole mentality of scarcity of get it while you can, because it might be gone. So that really was the foundation of how I, grew up into the world. And it was not no harm, no foul. My parents are great people. They did the best they could. My dad was an electrician and my mom was an at-home mom. With that, I put myself through school, got my finance degree from the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, and then got my master's at Notre Dame. All of that while building a business in learning how to not only, I would say, become income affluent, but then there's also being asset affluent, because it's 2 different ways in how you manage your money. One is how your affluence comes on your cash flows and your income side. And it's also in how you amass your wealth from actual dollars that you're growing in your net worth.
I like that. I jumped on your website real quick, and I have to tell you, I love your mission statement.
Oh.
To financially heal the world by teaching people how to live wallet and heart aligned. Wow. I have to tell you, that really spoke to me. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. You really can't manifest and do a quantum leap unless you have this concept that it's your heart and your mind, which it has to be in alignment, which is called coherence, right? And physicists have proved that it's this where you open up your nervous system to actually create quantum leaps in your life. And so the money is actually the result of that alignment. People feel like, oh, I'll just go after the money and then I'll go do these other things. Like, no. The money is actually a result of you aligning with your authenticity. And then your wallet actually grows because of that, because you're being as authentic as you possibly can be. What I have found is that so many people actually negotiate themselves away. And because they aren't authentically themselves plugging into the world, like they put up with a boss, or they feel like they need to do this for the paycheck to pay the bills. But yet their soul is calling them to do something completely different. But then they don't know how to pivot to that other place. And so they negotiate themselves away in that process. And then they shut up their money flow. That's the problem. That shuts their money flow off.
That's really interesting. Mm-hmm. I can say that I'm guilty of that. So pretty much everything you said resonated with me. I don't have that many siblings, but very similar story growing up. I mean, it made sense.
Exactly.
And it just is how it was, right? And it was all done with love, but that's just how it was. It's interesting when you talk about how we push it away with tolerating the boss or the job or just being in those situations, because I think many of us do that. It's interesting as you immerse more into this massive change of mindset, because what you're talking about, from my perspective, is a massive change of mindset, how things really do change. Maybe we can get into some examples with that, because you talk about learn to love yourself and money will love you. That's a really powerful statement. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's that you become a magnet, right? So many people have limiting belief patterns around money because of the scarcity that whether it's the homes that they grew up in or the communities they grew up in, that, oh, there's not enough money to go around. Or it was generations past of someone in your family who lived through the wartime that had a lot of scarcity. And then those habits and patterns get passed down from generation to generation. And until we start to create awareness around that and say, yeah, okay, this is what I've been taught, but this is actually what I desire. And then we start going after that desire of that we want to create something different. Like I remember when I was a kid that I used to deliver the newspaper, the Chicago Sun-Times and Tribune before school. People are like, what? I'm like, yeah, I get up at 6 a.m. and I deliver the newspaper because that gave me choices and money to do things, even at a young age in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I remember I would sit there and I'd read the finance section. I'm like, I have no idea why but we didn't pay for the newspapers ourselves, but I was reading other people's newspapers before I delivered them. And that's how I learned about what I do today. When we have those synchronicities of life and then we step into them, it actually allows you to become more authentic and more in alignment with self. And we don't realize that that's what actually generates then the money more to come to you because you are being authentic. Think of it like a Free Guy is a movie that's out there right now if anyone's seen it before, but it's when the two main characters are chasing another main character and they jump, but the stair doesn't actually show up until after they jump. In life,
Oh, wow.
right. So we have to understand that when we go for that next adventure or we jump to the next job or we jump to the next opportunity, the stair may not be there yet, but we have to understand if we're always surrendering into self and actually becoming more of who we are, the foundation actually shows up underneath you. And then that's when all the money actually also shows up to support you.
So it's trusting, jumping in the flow, and just trusting it's going to be there. It's interesting that you talked about delivering newspapers, and I'll say kudos to you because I also had a newspaper route, but I did the afternoon newspaper, not the morning one. So you got up early. But for women,
the morning one paid more.
It did, and I will say it was heavier to carry.
Yeah, it was
back in those days. But being a girl, like it was not. Sometimes it was hard for the girl to get it because it was really the boy's job, right? So we've shifted out of that mindset with that.
For sure.
But really what struck me is I've had a number of people share with me and some past guests on the show who talk about when people are really looking for, like, what's my passion? What am I supposed to be doing in life? And they seem lost with it. They'll recommend that people go back to when they were like in 5th grade or they were 8, 7, 9 years old. And what interested you? Like, what did you want to do then?
Exactly.
And I'm thinking, here's this woman reading the financial page at that age. So you found your passion early and you legitimately committed your life to it. Oh, committed. I don't know if that's the right word.
Well, but I will tell you, it's not that I didn't question it along the way. I remember when I first got out of school and everyone was getting all these jobs at these big 6 accounting firms and they were getting these offers of making 50, 60 grand a year. And I was like, but I want to create my own. And this company over here told me I could, but they're only willing to give me $300 a week. But what I created was mine. It wasn't somebody else's. And I was like, it excited the bejesus out of me. Like, I was just like, I don't want anyone creating my future. I don't want anyone calling the shots for my life. And I was just like, I wasn't afraid of that because I was never going back to eating fried bologna and spaghetti like my childhood. I was never going back to that. And I got excited. And this is why I tell people today that you have to follow what makes you giggle.
Oh.
And they're like, well, what's the smart financial advice? I'm like, well, which one makes you giggle more? And they're like, giggle? I'm like, I'm not kidding. Which decision makes you giggle more? Because that's the one in alignment with your heart and your soul. Because it feels light. It feels like it's not daunting and heavy, but that's your inner knowing because your physical body, your body intelligence is way smarter than your mind.
Oh, 100%.
But we have ignored that for years. That, okay, if your body contracts, that's a no, or it's not now. Right? And if your body is light and open and you're finding your giggle going, Okay, I'm not really sure why I'm supposed to go in this direction, but I think I'm going to go in this direction. And then you go there, and then everything else starts to make sense. We want it all figured out before we jump. And that's not where the magic happens. And that's not where the money shows up.
That's interesting. And again, a huge paradigm mind shift that you're working with this, I would say, from my perspective, and I could be wrong here, with the demographic that you work with, because that's not the mindset of your business, I would say.
Right.
Definitely you're unique. So that being said, how do you, Julie, define real wealth?
I categorize people as there's people who are poor, who stay in their struggle and suffering patterns. There's the debtors, people who are really stuck in the debt trap, which is like financial jail in this country.
Yes, it is.
Then then we have dreamers, people who kind of teeter between debt and abundance, but really they can't seem to get out of that. They're always dreaming, but not manifesting. Then there's the accumulators who have started to get more income affluence than what they're spending out the door, but they still dance with debt a little bit. And then there's what I call the rich but empty.
Oh.
And people always think people who are poor, debtors, dreamers, or accumulators go, well, when I get all that money and I save all that money, then it's going to be there. And I will tell you, my entire client base they were rich but empty. And this is how I figured this out. They had enough money to do what they wanted to do in life. They weren't stuck in the debt cycles. They weren't happy. And so they got to this place thinking that everything is going to be like, okay, once I get there, I'm going to be like, oh, it's going to be there. And then they're like, like it wasn't there. And that's why they're rich but empty. And so real wealth is the embodiment. The only way you get sustainable happiness is by being exactly who you were created to be, and let your freak flag fly, and don't let anything veer you from that, because you came here with some gifts to share with the world, whatever that is, and to do what you came to make an impact on. And unless you do that, you will never have sustainable happiness, no matter how much money you have. What you will do is you will create what I call leaky containers when you're not authentically plugged into the world, to where the money then drains out the door just like you accumulate. And so those things come through divorce, through laid off from jobs. It comes through family crises, health crises. Unfortunately, oftentimes, us as human beings, we create crises in our world to actually create shifts in our lives. And we don't have to get to the point of crisis. We can actually shift these things by becoming more authentically plugged into the world. And then you create sustainable wealth and real wealth in your life, because not only financial wealth, but also abundance in all areas of your life.
So real wealth isn't about the money or just about the money.
Correct. It's about all aspects of life.
No, that was beautiful, because I also have seen, just in past work I've done, people who have significant wealth who are incredibly unhappy. We grow up, and it's still very prevalent in the world, where you hear money is the root of all evils. That puts out a message that just shifts folks down a not good path, especially when they're trying to create.
Right. And when you get jammed up, so when you're dealing with financial scarcity and you're worried, or you're plugging into your fear or your anxiety on things, well, then you're contracting. So there's no way that if your nervous system doesn't actually feel safe, there's no way you're going to manifest the life that you want to create. There's no possible way to do that.
That makes so much sense.
Right. So it's about and that safety container can come in different places. And let's take it from a financial standpoint, for an example. So if you have to actually depend on a credit card or a home equity line, that if you lost your job, you didn't have your income coming in, that you had to go into debt to survive. And this happens to poor people, debtors, dreamers, and accumulators across the board. Because it's not necessarily about how much income you have. It's about your financial patterns with your cash flows, right? So I tell people this is where we have to shift you to a place of financial empowerment. At a most basic level, where that starts is, how do you depend on yourself when you have to plug into the world? Do you have to go to debt systems, or do you have something built up in a savings account so that you can depend on yourself and you've become your own bank? Because one is a place where you put yourself into financial scarcity or victim mode. The other is where you put yourself in a place of financial empowerment because you've sustained it for yourself. And so many people today use debt lines to actually cover their own butts when things go awry. Because it's not if, life happens. And the question is how much have you insulated yourself from life happening? Because we wouldn't worry so much about the politics or the economy or the inflation or anything else if you've insulated yourself properly, because you've become your own bank. But we have to decide to do that.
That makes sense. It's a conscious decision and you have to put action to it.
Mm-hmm.
Really nicely said. So congratulations. Congratulations on your best-selling book, Awaken Your Wealth. Creating a PACT to optimize money in your life.
Oh, thank you.
So I think that you touched a little bit on it, but can you talk a little bit more about the PACT to optimize the money in your life?
Yeah, and I've actually even created a 6-week course around this. So I put it in the book, and then I created a workbook, and then I realized, people kind of need some coaching along the way too in this process. So I have a 6-week course that I run every 8 weeks that people can do, where they get me coaching with them twice a week. The P is picturing the life that you want to create. Because if we looked at your reality today, most times that wouldn't feel empowering to people, right? Because you're kind of going, oh, here's my reality. Why should I bother? You start to get, things start to feel heavy to many people, right? I always start the process with, I want to picture what is your compelling reason for change. So I want to picture what you want to create moving forward. I get you have lots of gunk back here. Got it, get it. Every human's got it, right? But this is about, where do you want to go from this point moving forward? And so the first step in the process is really picturing the life that you want to create. Let's get that brainstorming down. And I have all these exercises and everything in the book, in my workbook, in the class, and we dig down deep. The second step in the process, which is the A in the PACT process, is we have to create emotional space by accepting our reality. So many of us just kind of stick our head in the sand like an ostrich, and we don't actually look at what our reality really is. So we need to accept the reality. Why does that do that? We have so much shame, blame, guilt, and judgment around our money positions that we have to release that shame, that guilt. We have to feel those emotions that are actually stuck in your system. Because what we don't realize is that every human being has a trauma or rejection before age 7. And in that, where it locks in your system, there are unprocessed emotions actually going on inside of your physical system. And by accepting the reality that you've created, it gives the opportunity for those emotions to come up and out. So for example, when I got my divorce, I was really sad, and actually to the point of anger at times. And I was like, why am I sad? Why am I sad? Just by saying that, because I was trying to get to this acceptance piece of my reality, because not only was I getting divorced, so was my relationships, but also half of the money that I created was going out the door. I created that wealth. He didn't create the wealth. I created all of that. And half of it was going out the door. And I was sitting here going, why am I sad? Why am I sad? And one day, all these feelings just came up and out. I still to this day don't even know exactly what it was, but it was the container that helped me to accept the reality that had been created up to this point. And in that same process, in the A, is not only accepting your reality, but it's also awakening your authenticity. It's like waking you back up who you are to your core and start being more of that person today. Because oftentimes we negotiate that part of ourselves away. And then the C in the PACT process is that we have to choose to change. We have to commit to that change. We have to start to walk that path, which leads to the last step, which is taking the action. So many financial planners out there just say, hey, I have these financial products for you and I need you to buy them and I need you to take action. And so let's get going. And I'm going, oh my God, there's these 3 steps way before that. And so it's like, okay, let's get it going, right? That's the PACT process that I walk people through, that I've been successful in my wealth management firm and walking people through for years. And now I do it through group coaching and classes and my books and my workbooks and everything.
I can see how this is that inside out approach. And now it's very clear to me why you are known as a financial healer and a money therapist. It makes so much sense.
Thank you.
I would say I wish there were so many more of you, because it would make such a difference in so many people's lives, which would just shift the whole, right?
Well, that's why we're doing things like this, right? Because I also wake up other financial planners to do it in a different way. And so more people start, right? It starts to ripple effect, because all I have to do is be the light that I am. And then it'll wake up all the other people who are supposed to help the way that I am. because I had the courage to actually let my freak flag fly and stop being a mahogany desk financial firm with a stiff suit on and started to open up and really get to the humanity component of finance.
That's great. You're the change agent for the industry. Because when I was thinking of this, I was thinking more from the customer, the people, your clients, the people who come in. And as you were talking, I'm like, your industry can just feel painful a lot of times from some people's perspectives. And I'm like,
also for mine.
That's it. Being a change agent for the industry also, like it's both parts that are really, really important. So kudos to you. And thank you for flying that flag.
Yeah, let me share the story. So years ago, it was my first book came out. My first book is called The Emotion Behind Money. And because I started to realize there is this tide with our emotions and how we process our money. And I was asked to speak. I had a female advisor who was about 20 years older than I was. And she asked me to speak in front of a group of like 350 financial planners. I spoke about how I approach things, how I look at your family life, your work life, your personal life, and all this surrounds how your money is manifested in your world. And when I was done speaking, she came up to the microphone and she said, isn't it how interesting how these young people just think so differently, but then they'll realize that they got to go back to the numbers, because she was embarrassed about how I presented my information to the industry. And it was right at that time that I made a conscious choice that the clientele, anytime I speak to the general public, they love that they finally found somebody that's speaking this kind of English about money.
Yeah, absolutely.
But my industry was like, oh, no, it's all about the numbers. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago until Harvard Business Review came out with going, well, there's this thing called behavioral finance where you have to take the emotions of people. And I'm going, 17 years after I wrote my first book, Harvard Business Review is coming up and going, oh, I'm just ahead of the curve. That's all that means. And it's okay, because like you said, I'm a change agent.
You're a pioneer.
Right. And instead of using that as a suffering pattern, which many of us could do, like if you've got the insights to be your authentic self, and it's way before anyone else is letting their freak flag fly, it's coming. It's coming. We're all here to help evolution. You just have to have the courage enough to be yourself. And I'm just grateful that I'm a stubborn Irish girl from the south side of Chicago, and I had the courage to step through.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
And so there are more people today talking about things like that.
Was it just always part of who you were? You were pulled to these concepts and you merged them? Or was there something that had happened? Because most people would put these two concepts into different containers where you merged it, which makes me feel like this is just who you are, and it's been who you are from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's exactly who I am. Yeah. You know what? I was just curious, right? I was noticing that clients would not open up. I'm a warm and fuzzy person. I hug everybody. One of my first bosses told me, Julie, you have to stop hugging people when they come in the door and you need to shake their hand. And I was like, what? Like, I'm asking people to tell me everything about their world, and their money is like their sacred thing. It's like their black box that they're opening up right in front of me. And you don't want me to hug them? Like, I couldn't even I was like, huh? I was like going, I didn't stop hugging people. I'm like, I can't not be myself. See, this is how somebody else might have negotiated themselves away and started doing the handshake. And that's when you no longer be authentic. But I just kept doing that. And then I started to realize going, I don't even really resonate with this office space, because I was renting office space in a mahogany desk place. And then in 2003, I decided to go buy my own office space in the West Loop in Chicago. And it's a loft space with exposed brick. And
nice.
Of course, what does the universe send me? The universe sends me my first $1 million client, my first referral when I was in this office. And she walked in and she was like, this doesn't look like a financial firm. And she actually never did business with me because I wasn't the mahogany desk. So it was like my challenge from the universe to say, are you going to really let your freak flag fly? Or are you going to go back and conform? And I was just like, I don't really want clients who don't really like the things that I like. So, okay, she can just go. I'll find more millionaires. And I did. I manage almost $500 million in management right now. When you choose to be you, and it's okay that other people choose other things, all the money, all the business, all the opportunities show up because you're choosing to be yourself. And this happens with every human being out there. Again, I just kept surrendering into what made me happy and what made me giggle, what made me want to be in business longer and do it with people that I love. Like there's not one client that I don't have today that I absolutely love them as human beings, because I'm done with the people who used to beat me up and say nasty things when the stock market would go down. I'm going, I want people who have mutual respect and mutually beneficial relationships, right? Like, but we all can choose to create that. We just have to believe we can.
I love it. You used a lot of key words for me: the curiosity, the creating. We need to imagine what it looks like and then believe that it's out there.
Right.
So, Julie, for me, it's all about freedom.
Right.
I would say freedom is definitely the foundation of my manifestations.
Right.
How does your work influence one's freedom?
The debt structures in our country and in our world actually create a lack of freedom. So you're going to financial jail if you choose to be in debt. I was on Capitol Hill a few years ago and I had this one congressman. He's like, well, I want to know, how is it that we get more people in America to save for retirement? And I was like, you're asking the wrong question. I'm like, you have to help Americans get out of debt so that they have enough cash flow to then actually save for retirement. Unless we choose, because clearly it's big business, right? Having debt structures is big business. But until you as an individual decide to become your own bank and stop depending on structures outside of yourself to live a lifestyle, you're never going to have your freedom, because you're not your own bank. And I'm not saying it's not easy. I'm not saying that it takes time to do it. People will argue with me in the financial sector and they will say, well, but it's business efficient to take out this $1 million loan to expand your business. Yes, you can. But when that expansion and that plan that you have doesn't go exactly how you planned it to be, which it never does, you then are still paying for your past choices and you can't live in the present moment, which means you can't flow with life because you're not living in the now.
Wow.
Because you're stuck in your past.
Yeah, no, that's a massive wow.
Right?
No, I believe that.
And I had a client years ago. What she did is, you can't change your world until you say, okay, where's your newfound money? Your newfound money is things like a pay raise, a tax return, an inheritance. You paid off a debt. This is all money that you never had before, or you got a bonus at work. So I'm not telling you to change your life the way that is right now, but just take the newfound money, whatever that is, whether it's a raise, a bonus, a tax return, and put it in the way that you want to clean up your past while you're living in the present moment and plan for the future all at the same time. Because we have to interrupt your system that you're currently operating on. And you do it with the new stuff, not with saying, oh, you got all this shame, blame, guilt, and judgment and the crap that you created so far. No. Just accept what you have right now. And with the new stuff, we redesign it to feel empowered in your financial state to become your own bank and get your freedom. So like I had one woman, and I challenged her on this, because if you don't do this, life will do it for you. She wanted to get out of her suffering cycle. She made $200,000. She was successful. She was in her mid-50s, did a great job building her career. She lived in the Seattle area. But she had a $900,000 house, because that's what houses cost when you're living in Seattle. So her employer said, you know what? We're not going to do this anymore. So she started contracting work because of age discrimination. She wasn't able to get another full-time job at that level in her house, and she was pulling down her savings to pay for her house. And she said to me, she goes, I sold my house and I bought my freedom. So I helped her design. When I go back to the P in the PACT process, I said, well, what do you want to do? She goes, I want to travel. She goes, I don't want to be stuck in one place, but that house, because of the cost, it made me stuck in one place. And I go, okay, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Like, here's a blank canvas. What do you want to do with it? She spent the next 7 years of her life, 3 months living in Seattle, 3 months at a friend's flat in London, 3 months with her aging mom in Chicago, and then 3 months in the Southwest in Arizona. She did that for 7 years, rotating. She got more contracting jobs. She got back up to that $200,000 income, but she was free as a bird, and she was traveling the world way before COVID hit and other people were doing Zoom and online stuff. And you know what? Because she chose her freedom over anything else. But she had to redesign it and choose what was making her feel empowered at that point in her life.
That's really magical. And I think that, again, I want to reiterate it. I agree with you. It's clearly about making a choice and putting action to it.
Right. Right.
I think that's the piece that gets missed a lot of times, especially in the manifestation process, so to speak.
Of course.
Because you have to put some energy and action
Right.
into it.
Right. Yeah. And because if you don't put your energy into it and step into it, well, the synchronicities of life can happen, but you have to step into them when they occur. And sometimes it takes some courage, and it's okay. It'll happen, right? We'll get there. But it's just about having the courage to understand that when you step into that next adventure, just have that knowing if you're choosing your giggle and you're choosing what makes you feel calm and centered, that everything's going to show up to support you because you're in alignment with self.
That makes so much sense. It's like people spend all this time studying and doing the work and wanting to be on the path, but it's really trusting that this real and effective.
Right. Right.
And trusting it.
That's the big piece, is trusting. And you know what? And sometimes you have to build that trust muscle. I always talk about you have to build your financial muscles. Sometimes you have to just do that. Maybe you have to start with something small. That's why I tell people, like with your newfound money. So for an example, like if you got a pay raise, let's just say you got a 6% pay raise. And you said, okay, well, let me take half of that. Not all of it, just half. And you say, I'm going to take 1% of that raise. Let's just say it's $50 a month is 1%. So $50 a month is getting added monthly automatically to your highest interest rate debt that you have. People will say, well, that's not that much. And it's not going to make that big impact. Energetically, it's an enormous impact. Why? Because you're choosing to shift a different direction. So we have to change your money energy, right? And then that other $50, that other 1% goes into your spending bucket. But put it towards a spending goal, something you desire. And open up a new savings account. There's plenty of ones online that you can name them. And I love the fact that you can name your financial intention. You can call it a vacation fund. You can call it your new car fund. You can call it your new house fund. You can call it whatever your spending goal is. Sometimes women have jewelry goals. Some people have guys who always want new golf clubs, right? And whatever it is that you desire, it's about you. Call it that. Don't merge it with any other money, and you have that $50. Start building in that bucket to get you that next spending goal that you want. And then take that other $50, and then you start like with short-term, mid-term, and long-term. If you don't have an emergency reserve set up another one of those savings accounts online that says emergency reserves. Or I had one person say, I lost my job fund, because they always touch their savings accounts all the time. I'm like, you need to name it something so you don't touch it anymore. And so we called it, I lost my job fund. I had one person on this, and this is another great story. One person who had it on their in their midterm bucket for spending. They were so conservative. They never wanted to let money go. And I'm like, I called it her piss away fund.
Oh my gosh, I love it. That is so good. What a healthy thing to help someone grow and move along.
Right? It's like whatever it does to be the catalyst to get you excited about what you're creating moving forward. Right? Because you have to find that excitement again. And if you take that newfound money and you interrupt your patterning, this system has worked for years with my clients, and it gets them to exactly where they want to be. Only with taking the things of the newfound money. Forget about everything you have currently, just everything new moving forward, and set up your system. And this is what my course is all about, and setting that the system up. And in my book, Awaken Your Wealth, it maps it out for people, because you deserve to have the life exactly the way that you want it to be. Sometimes we just don't know how to get there.
I would agree. To shift a little bit, there's so many laws, the laws of abundance, the laws of the universe. Can you talk a little bit about the laws of money?
Yeah, you know what? I actually just produced my most recent book. It's called The 4 Spiritual Laws of Money.
Oh, really? Okay.
So good question.
I'm in the flow.
Right, exactly. That's exactly what you are. So the 4 spiritual laws of money. So one of them is manifestation begins with desire, right? Because you have to be excited, right?
Yeah.
You have to be excited about what it is that you're going to do. Why? Because it raises your energetic vibration. We now know that diseases occur at certain megahertz, and it's because of our emotions.
Seriously, yeah.
Right? So if you're angry or sad, those are lower vibrating emotions. If you're happy and gratitude and, all the joyful, those are higher vibrations. In the diseases, so they know that diabetes is at 44 megahertz, cancer is at 52 megahertz. Like they know the vibration of diseases and your emotions create those diseases. So when you're excited about something, so manifestation begins with desire. Well, when you're excited, then you're higher vibrating, you have better health, you're more excited, and then that creates the attraction of more money coming to you, right? Because you're vibrating.
Yeah, makes sense.
Another one of those laws in my book is that the heart is way smarter than the mind.
Oh, 100%.
Right? But we follow, well, what's the smart thing? What's the logical thing for me to do? We follow this because of our great educational system in this country is giving everybody a disservice because we're trusting this and told that this is, our brains are telling us more of what is important than our hearts. And this is where the disconnect happens. But you cannot, unless you have coherence going on between your heart and your head, you can't open up your nervous system to have that quantum leap.
Yep, that is a very powerful statement.
Yeah. And when we start to realize that there is simplicity in all of this, it's just about us aligning with it. This is not something huge. And when we look at it from a place of that we as human beings come from like a fourfold being, and I talk about this in my book, The Four Spiritual Laws of Money, there's our physical selves, our spiritual selves, the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual, all four. And think of it like the legs of a chair. And that's what makes each of us up. And so, for example, like your spiritual self and your mental self might be really high because you're highly educated in your mental. But if you're thinking that everything's left brain logical linear and you're spiritual and you're so 3D world that you're not really aligning with your spiritual self, your higher self, well, then this is why you're not having quantum leaps and why you're blocking and tackling and you're wondering why you're not getting anywhere on the treadmill, right? As well as the physical. Like if your physical body, if you are not eating green vegetables that, whether it's green smoothies 3 days a week so that the chemicals, they now know that the chemicals in our brain are at a higher vibration when you have 3 green smoothies a week. Like that's so important for the chemistry in your brain. And then also, then it's your emotional self. Like if you're emotionally reactive, like it's unbelievable how many people in the country right now are on anti-anxiety and antidepressants.
Oh, I can attest to that. I work in healthcare also. So, yeah.
And I really, truly believe that this is because we are not in alignment with self. We're trying to be something outside of ourselves. And then that creates anxiety and depression when you're trying to be something that you're not. And really, you need to be exactly who you are. And you will align with self. And if you don't care what anything outside of yourself says or does, because you're aligning with self, I guarantee you that's going to bring you more happiness. But if we're dumbing ourselves down with those medications, well, that's going to be a weaker part of your overall being, right? And it's not that you may not need it for a bridge. You might, right? I mean, I'm certainly not here to say that one way is great for everybody because I don't think one way is great for everybody. I think everybody needs some kind of bridge to get them to where they want to be. And the question is what is that and what aligns with you? And every path that you choose is okay, right? But we're so afraid that it's got to be something that somebody else said that's not in alignment with self.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you said about being curious.
Right.
And putting yourself out there and
Right.
taking chances and taking a moment to be brave.
And choose to be an adventurer of your own life, no matter what age you are.
I would agree.
Take the next adventure because that's what gets you more excited to keep living. And it brings you more money, more love, more opportunities, and more happiness than you can ever imagine.
Okay, so I think that that's related because you had talked at one point about the mind, heart, money, and the soul connection.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of fits in there. And when I think of the mind, I think more ego.
Yep.
And when I think of the heart, I'm thinking more soul connection.
Agreed.
And then the money just is one of the I use the word concept. It's not a concept, actually. It's one of the elements that are in there.
Right. Well, when you're in aligned with your heart and your soul, more money shows up. The thing is that I need people to realize is that it doesn't necessarily come in the packages you always expect it to.
Oh, I think that's important to acknowledge because
right?
More times than not, it does not.
Correct.
Would you say?
100%. And if we can detach how it shows up.
The outcome.
Right? So for an example, use me as an example. I had always set the intention that I wanted it all. I wanted to be the mom with a successful business, and I wanted a great relationship. I had no idea that was going to result in, when I was setting those intentions 20 years ago, that was going to result in me getting a divorce, redesigning my company and having different employees. Like the things that I shedded along the way was never my intention. No one in my family was ever divorced. And there was no way. When I got divorced, people were like, Julie got divorced? Because Julie doesn't do those things. Julie has her shit together, right? Like people, that's the perception. And then when I got divorced, I was going, but it wasn't in alignment with self, right? That I was in that relationship, I was negotiating myself away. And when I started to realize that and going, I can't do this anymore. Now we could have evolved together, but that didn't happen because both parties need to want to evolve together, right? And I was the one that changed. It wasn't him. He was exactly the same. But what's interesting is post-divorce, years later, we have a great relationship as co-parents.
I love it.
Right? But it came to the fact that I had to have the courage to say, I'm not going down suffering patterns. We're going to rise above this. And it just happened to come in the package of us no longer being married. Right? But everybody is happier. That's the best part.
I agree. Suffering's optional, and it's the path, and it's looking beyond that event that didn't look so touchy-feely to get there.
Right. So it doesn't necessarily come in the packages that you expect, but it's about your willingness to keep walking the path, to surrender into self, to become more of who you're meant to be.
Beautiful, and I appreciate you putting yourself out there. That was a pretty authentic story. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, you're welcome.
Julie, I know that you also have a podcast.
Yes.
Wake Up Your Wealth.
Yeah.
So what would a listener expect when they tune into that?
Yeah, it's more of what we've talked about in drilling down into, I give a lot of examples and stories of clients that I've worked with through the years. Things really come in patterns. One of the free worksheets that I have on my website is financial life brainstorming questions. And I talk about some of that stuff on my podcast to drill down, like not only in your financial life, but I have a worksheet that's for your family life, your careers, because so many people get jammed up in, there's some area of your life that you're really jammed up in, typically. And then it's like, how do I start to get some of that relief so things can start to shift and change? And so depending on, I always tell people, like, maybe take the easiest one first. Because again, we want it to be simple. But, my podcast, I talk about these things and examples because I think we can learn from others and others' examples. And I've also, on my podcast, I have Lives That Thrive. So I actually talk with people who's actually have shifted it, because it's like, if somebody's talking about how they're shifting something, there's 100 other people that have the same situation, the same thing, and they can learn from each other. So I want to talk about the things that are working in the world as opposed to the problems that are in the world. And so that's why I started doing the Lives That Thrive. And that's a part of the podcast as well.
Well, I applaud you for that. And I applaud you on focusing on the positive. Like, let's focus on the solutions. We already know what the problems are. And I agree with you. When one person tells a story, it's an infinite number of people relate to it. And it's going to influence them in a way of, this is possible. It creates possibility. It creates the opportunity. Maybe, just maybe,
right?
You know what? I can try a piece of this for myself. It's what you said, taking that small step.
Right. It gives possibility. I think we just have to realize that we are the creators of our lives and we can create anything that we want. We just have to decide that we deserve it and then have the courage and find the courage to take that next step.
You made a statement and you sort of touched on it a little earlier in the show. So you talk about heal your emotions with money to empower yourself. So when I first sort of hear that statement, for me, it sounds counterintuitive, right? To heal your emotions with money to empower yourself, because a lot of times we feel like money's the root of all evils. Money's what's causing me to have maybe not the most positive emotions.
Right.
So let's flip it. What does that look like?
We either work things out or we act it out. We do it through our money, our health, our relationships, right? When we have those emotions that are going on, we have a lot of that shame, blame, guilt, and judgment around money. And it's about releasing that shame, blame, guilt, and judgment. And remember, that shame, blame, guilt, and judgment may not be actually something that's yours. It might be something that you're carrying from your grandparents, right? It's generational, right? Like sometimes when somebody's a hoarder and they're always afraid it's going to fall apart and they're just holding on and holding on. And I'm going, oh my God, my job with you is to get you to start living because you're not actually living because you're hoarding so much. They're like, well, I don't think I can really take that vacation because I want to be responsible and I got to keep this job. And I'm like going, you're trying to protect yourself so much that you're actually not. This is why you're not married. This is why you're not leaving your state. This is why. So I'll give them assignments to create a savings account that even if it's as little as something like going up from Illinois to Wisconsin Dells because you remember a good memory of that when you were a kid. Like we have to start waking up those good memories past all that fear that's going on inside of you. That's something the bottom's always going to fall out. Our emotions are dictating every behavior we have financially. And so when you start to work through those emotions, what you do is you're expanding yourself. You're expanding your energy because your emotions are just stuck in your physical system. So emotions are energy in motion. So we just have to feel those emotions because they have nothing to do with the situation of the here and now. It has to do with ones that got stuck when you were younger than 7 years old. Because our subconscious mind and our amygdala stores those experiences because to survive when you were a child, you shut down your emotions, you didn't feel them, you sucked it up to survive to get to the next place. And this is all a pattern and a subconscious thing that happens. So until we start to open that up and feel those emotions, you won't fully have that freedom until you start to allow that stuff to come up and out. And we will continue to create financial struggle for ourselves if we don't go through that process.
Okay, that's important. You know what, Julie? You are just an absolutely special human being.
Thank you.
I say that very sincerely and from my heart. If someone wants to work with you, like what does that look like and how do they connect with you?
Sure. I've created different layers for no matter where a person's financial situation is. I have a lot of free things on juliemurphy.com. Every 8 weeks, I do that free workshop. From there, I offer to people, once they go through the free workshop, they can go into a discovery, which is still group. And I charge $30 for that. So that's a group session. So I can drill down into some of your questions. And then some people decide then to go further into a 6-week program with me through the PACT process. And also through my wealth management company, JMC Wealth Management. If you want somebody to help you and you want to do one-on-one instead of the group stuff, you can get a hold of us at jmcwealth.com. So it's wherever a person is at in terms of how they can, because certainly working with me one-on-one is more costly than working in a group standpoint.
Okay.
But I've tried to create a menu because I only have 24 hours in a day as well. But I wanted to help as many people as I could.
I know that you come from the heart.
Thank you.
I'll make sure that I get all that information on the website also for people so they can jump in that, and I'll include that in the show notes.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Two bright lights sharing. You know, when you're more authentic and I'm more authentic, we help to raise the vibration, and then it creates more opportunities for more people drawn to do it. I just want people follow their giggle, follow their happiness, because everything will work.
That is just so beautiful and positive. Any other last thoughts that you want to leave with the listeners?
Let your freak flag fly. You got to be yourself.
Oh my God, I just love it. Like, my giggle has been giggling through most of this podcast. You know, I think it doesn't necessarily show in the face and the emotions.
Yeah.
But like, I've had a number of times where, you know, you get the chills down the back of your neck.
Yeah,
and
for
different
sure.
things. So
Right. Then you know it's the right stuff.
it's definitely resonated with me.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was a couple things that you said that just clearly struck a chord with me in a very positive, fun way. I can't thank you enough for being on the show. You are truly an amazing person.
Thank you.
Amazing soul who is making such a difference, not just with the clients you work with in your industry. That energy's out there and it's shifting all of humanity's. Kudos to you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity. That's what helps me get moving forward.
And I want to thank all the listeners out there. Thank you for taking time out of your valuable day to join both Julie and I. remember, embrace that wild soul. Until next time, thank you, Julie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Wild Soul Gatherings Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. To learn more about our guests, please go to our website, wildsoulsgathering.com. We're very eager to hear from our listeners what you thought of the episode, topics you might like us to cover in the future, your thoughts on spirituality, questions you may have. Please feel free to send us an email at wildsoulsgathering@gmail.com. This is your host, Dr. Sandra Marie, sending each of you peace and love. Until we meet again, embrace your wild soul.